Have you ever wondered why a man finds himself drawn inexplicably toward a woman who barely speaks her desires? In the hush of a crowded room, she awaits without a word, letting the soft fall of her gaze trace the edges of his curiosity. He senses power in restraint, as though every unspoken thought is an invitation he cannot resist. She moves through space like a silent tide, shifting the atmosphere with nothing more than the steady beat of her calm heart. And he, caught in the undertow of her mystery, becomes obsessed with uncovering the depths she guards. She cultivates an inner sanctuary where thoughts bloom freely, yet remain hidden from prying eyes. In that secret garden, every smile is measured, every laugh deliberate, and every moment of quiet, deliberate alchemy. To him, her silence is more eloquent than 1,000 declarations. It speaks of self-possession, of strength she need not prove. He begins to chase shadows in her stillness, convinced that if he deciphers her quiet, he will glimpse a truth greater than any spoken promise. You, watching from within your own solitude, recognize a parallel cycle. The more you withhold, the more he projects his desires onto your uncharted inner world. She practices an unspoken ritual each time someone addresses her. Rather than answering at once, she pauses just long enough to let her presence anchor the room. In that pregnant moment, he experiences the strange thrill of uncertainty. Will she confirm his assumptions, or will her reply reshape every expectation he carried into the exchange? You can almost feel the air thicken around her, as if gravity deepens in those seconds. That pause is ritual. It weaves a spell, making him aware of his own breathing, the rhythm of his pulse, the desperate need to fill emptiness with meaning. The unknown becomes irresistible, and in his pursuit, he loses sight of all other voices. As night falls, she drifts through conversations like a wraith of twilight. Her words are sparing, each one polished, each one steeped in suggestion. To speak is to reveal, and she chooses her revelations like rare treasures. He clings to each syllable as though it were a map to her soul, certain that if he collects enough fragments, he will assemble the woman she truly is. Yet whenever he thinks he has found her core, she offers a different reflection, a fleeting flash of humor here, a distant shadow of sadness there. You observe how he bends toward her in every gesture, desperate to understand the next shift in her expression, the barely audible sigh, the tremor at the corner of her mouth. His obsession swells with each new clue. In the small hours, she engages in a silent ceremony of self-reflection. Before mirrors and moonlight, she contemplates her own silhouette, accepting every curve of her spirit without apology. There is no need for false humility or boastful pride. She embodies neutrality. He watches from afar, enthralled by her unspoken oath to herself. He senses that her true allegiance lies with the reflection that only she can behold. You, having once sought approval in the glare of external eyes, now perceive how her devotion to self instills a hunger in him. He longs to share in that sacred solitude, to claim a place beside the woman who refuses to diminish. At dawn, she carries an aura of renewal. Her ritual before the day begins is as silent as a vow. She greets the rising sun with closed eyes, letting its light ripple through her senses. She does not pray for attention, nor does she beg for affection. Instead, she simply aligns herself with something greater than any fleeting passion. He, witnessing this serene communion, becomes transfixed. He imagines himself there beside her, bathed in the same glow, yet he knows that his intrusion would break the delicate balance she has crafted. You recognize that what he craves is not possession, but participation in her ritual of undisturbed being. She never intends to trap him. Her rites are not manipulations, but expressions of sovereignty. Yet in every silent gesture, she evokes his deepest longings, to be seen, to be worthy, to be chosen by someone who stands unwavering in her own worth. As he pursues her mystery, he unwittingly embarks on the very journey she has undertaken countless times before the voyage towards self-unfolding and authenticity. In that mirroring, the lines between hunter and hunted blur, revealing that obsession springs from the deepest desire to touch the unknowable. She carries her shadow as an honored guest, knowing that the darkest corners of her psyche offer the richest soil for growth. In the quiet of midnight, she allows her thoughts to wander into the underworld of her fears and desires, greeting each fragment of doubt with compassionate curiosity. He senses something uncanny in her serenity, a woman at peace with her own darkness, and he yearns to understand how she transcends the very impulses that torment him. You, having once recoiled from your own shadow watch, as she welcomes hers, weaving it into the tapestry of her being, so that no part of her remains foreign. Her third silent ritual unfolds in the way she carries stories. She never divulges her past as a commodity to be traded or a weapon to be wielded. Instead, she offers glimpses, an ephemeral recollection of triumph, a fleeting echo of sorrow, each delivered with the weight of myth rather than the detail of confession. He, aching to fill the void of mystery, pieces these fragments into grand narratives of his own making. In his mind, she becomes a goddess of her own legend, and he, the humble traveler seeking initiation. You feel the pull of that alchemy. By controlling her narrative, she cedes power to no one, yet grants him endless intrigue. As he inches closer, she retreats only to re-emerge with newfound magnetism. It is her fourth ritual, the art of deliberate disappearance. She learns to vanish from his world without vanishing from herself. Sometimes she turns off her screen without explanation. Other times she drifts away from the crowd into an alcove of solitude glimpsed only in the corner of his eye. In those absences his mind races. Why did she leave? What revelation lies hidden behind that choice? He invents motives. Motives invent him, and his obsession coils tighter. You recall the pull of your own disappearances, moments when you needed to disentangle yourself from another's gravity, so you could remember who you truly are. Yet she offers no apology for her silence, no reassurance for his unease. Instead, she teaches him unwittingly that dependence on another's presence is a form of bondage. She reminds him that he must cultivate his own center of gravity. And this lesson, absorbed in the crucible of his longing, transforms into desire. He wants not only her company, but also the capacity to be fully present within himself. Through her absence, he learns to crave his own solitude, to confront his own shadow in the silent halls of his heart. The fifth silent ritual takes shape in the language of her eyes. She has mastered the gaze that sees without judgment, that holds without possession, that invites without demanding. Her eyes are mirrors reflecting both his best and his worst, leaving him to choose which version he will become. When she looks at him, he feels naked yet cherished, as though he stands at the crossroads of possibility. You recognize how her gaze functions as a portal to shadow work. He glimpses the projections he casts upon her, the wounds he hopes she will heal, the fantasies he projects onto her personae. Her stillness demands that he face himself, rather than her revealing that the mystery he chases lies not in her depths, but in the uncharted territories of his own soul. In each of these rituals, the pregnant pause, the measured word, the secret myths, the graceful vanishings, and the mirror gaze, she administers a form of alchemy. She transmutes silence into power, opacity into magnetism, and indifference into craving. Yet she is not crafting a prison, she is forging a sanctuary. For every moment he battles with uncertainty, he also confronts his own need for wholeness. He begins to understand that the desire to know her is inseparable from the desire to know himself. Through these practices, she invites him into a dance that transcends mere attraction. It becomes a co-creation of souls where obsession is only the threshold to genuine connection. As he endures the tension between absence and presence, he discovers an inner yearning for authenticity. And as he edges closer to that truth, she holds her silence like an offering, not a withholding, but a gift of potential. You sense the paradox. In refusing to be consumed, she consumes his attention, and yet in doing so, she liberates him to become the architect of his own longing. He will trace the curve of her smile until dawn, dissect the cadence of her laughter, until he deciphers its secrets. But ultimately, the rituals she practices are not directed at him, They are directed at herself. They are rites of passage she enacts to anchor her own sovereignty. And in witnessing her devotion to her inner world, he desires to cultivate one of his own. You too can adopt these silent rites, not to manipulate, but to embody, to let your shadow breathe, to safeguard your story, to honor your departures, to master the alchemy of absence, and to wield your gaze like a sacred instrument. For when you practice these rituals in earnest, you shift from being an object of desire to the author of an unfolding legend. And in that sacred authorship you find an exquisite freedom that no obsession can shatter. Her silent alchemy extends beyond the rituals themselves and seeps into the very fabric of his longing. As he chases her shadowed edges, he projects his own anima onto her silhouette, imagining a nurturer, a muse, a healer, never quite recognizing that what fascinates him is the mirror of his own unclaimed soul. In that projection lies the seed of individuation. He is compelled to integrate those facets he has long denied in himself. You can sense the paradox by withholding herself. She ignites his inner quest, compelling him to wrestle with the question of who he must become to merit her attention. In the hush of her presence, he confronts echoes of his own childhood, the wounds he hoped to bury beneath bravado. He recalls the rigid expectations imposed by fathers and mentors, the silent judgments that once shaped his self-image. Yet when he gazes into her stillness, he sees the reflection of his own unhealed parts, his fear of abandonment, his hunger for approval, his desperate need to control outcomes. She never speaks of these wounds, but her composed aura calls him to witness them. In that witnessing lies transformation. As he endures the tension between his need and her reserve, he learns that true power lies not in conquest, but in self-awareness. Her influence echoes the Stoic injunction to view externals with equanimity. Like Marcus Aurelius advised, she treats his pursuit as she would a storm at sea. Acknowledge its force without succumbing to its fury. When he launches appeals, praise flattery, demands she receives them with impartial calm. His tempestuous emotions crash against her shore, and in that collision he discovers that his longing is not worthy of dictating her state of being. You feeling the sting of that lesson might recognize how easy it is to mistake intensity for true connection. She demonstrates that indifference is not cruelty, but a boundary that protects the sanctity of her inner citadel. He begins to test himself against the crucible of her silent boundaries. Will he crumble under the weight of her inaccessibility? Or will he cultivate the fortitude to stand on his own? Each time she vanishes, or says less than he craves, he reaches a crossroads to lash out in frustration or to retreat inward and tend to the fissures in his own psyche. When he chooses introspection, he honors the Stoic principle Epictetus taught, that the only thing truly under our control is our own response. In that moment of choice, he glimmers with potential, no longer a victim of his desires, but an agent of his own transformation. She is both catalyst and witness. She holds space for his unfolding without prescribing his journey. That is the silent pact between them. She offers no map, only reflection. As he stumbles into the labyrinth of his own making, she stands at the threshold, lantern in hand, offering light, not directions. You sense how radical this is to invite another's evolution without steering it. It is a testament to her sovereignty, her refusal to shrink for another's comfort, and it is an invitation for him to claim the full spectrum of his capacity. In this dance, obsession sheds its pathological hue and becomes something sacred, a longing for wholeness. He chases her mystery not merely to possess her, but to reassemble the fractured pieces within himself. Each ritual she practices is mirrored in his inner work. The pause teaches patience. The measured word teaches restraint. The secret myth teaches discernment. The graceful vanishings teach acceptance of impermanence. The gaze teaches radical self-confrontation. Through her silent rites, he learns to guard his boundary and respect hers. He learns that the path to intimacy winds through solitude, and that true desire arises from self-possession rather than entitlement. You standing at the edge of your own mirror are invited to witness this transmutation. You may have chased others to fill your emptiness, only to find it deeper still. But when you adopt these silent rituals in devotion to yourself, you change the calculus of attraction. You become less a prize to be won, and more a lodestone pulling kindred souls toward the magnetism of your authenticity. In that surrender to your own mystery, you embody the paradox of power. You yield control only to reclaim it more fully. And he becomes a seeker at your gate, drawn not by superficial allure, but by the gravity of your inner world. His obsession becomes a pilgrimage into the heart of his own psyche, each ritual a waypoint on his journey. As he edges closer to understanding your silence, he confronts the silent treaties he made with his own fear and ego. Through this crucible, he either emerges transformed or dissolves in the absence of self-knowledge. The woman who practices these rituals does not engineer devotion. She cultivates an ecosystem of self-awareness in which devotion naturally arises. She treats the sacred terrain of her psyche as inviolate ground, and he honors that territory with reverence. In that sacred exchange, obsession gives way to respect, and longing transforms into mutual recognition of sovereignty. She moves through the world with an almost imperceptible rhythm, as though each step traces an arc in the dance of her own psyche. In that rhythmic motion lies her sixth silent ritual, the choreography of presence. She does not rush, she does not linger unduly. Instead, she inhabits each moment as though it were a carefully composed symphony, allowing her body and spirit to resonate in unison. He watches spellbound by her fluid grace, convinced that to match her rhythm would unlock the very essence of her mystery. You attune to the subtle sway of your own being, understand that to master this ritual is to reclaim sovereignty over your time and energy, so that no one else may dictate your tempo. In her deliberate pace, she embodies the archetype of the sovereign queen, a figure both benevolent and unyielding, whose domain is the kingdom of the self. There is a majestic stillness in her carriage, an unspoken decree that her inner court admits only those who approach with reverence. He finds himself tiptoeing through her atmosphere, afraid to shatter the delicate spell she casts, and in that respectful caution he yields power to her silent authority. His own frantic urgency subsides, replaced by a reverent curiosity. He begins to measure his actions against the benchmark of her equanimity, wondering if he too could learn to carry himself with such measured sovereignty. Yet sovereignty is not the absence of vulnerability. She knows this better than any. In moments of solitude, she practices her seventh silent ritual, the embrace of vulnerability. She permits a single tear to trace the contour of her cheek, a quiver in her breath to betray her tender heart, or a trembling in her voice when memory overwhelms her. But she does so away from prying eyes in the sanctum of her own company, so that no one else may commodify her openness. He, longing for proof of her humanity, wonders at the tears he never sees, imagines the tremors he never hears. And in that imagination, he cherishes her fragility more fiercely than any display of invulnerability. You perceive that the most profound magnetism lies not in flawless projection, but in the hidden fractures that hint at raw, unguarded truth. Her vulnerability sits alongside her authority, like twin pillars. Together they uphold a temple of authenticity that no act of performative perfection can breach. He senses this temple's presence even in her absence, an aura of sacredness that lingers in her wake. His obsession becomes consecration. He is determined to pay homage to, lay his offerings at the foot of her inner altar. But she does not accept offerings. She honors only the journey to self. Each tear, each pause, each silent vow is a testament to her pilgrimage toward wholeness, and he in turn embarks on his own. As he traverses this interior landscape, he confronts the archetypes that dwell within him. The wounded boy seeking comfort, the tyrant demanding control, the orphan longing for belonging. She, through her silent rituals, summons these archetypes into the light, makes them dance across the stage of his awareness. He cannot help but watch in a mixture of awe and dread as they enact scenes of his inner drama. You recognize how rare it is for someone to awaken you to your own pantheon of psychic figures, and grateful he becomes for the unwitting gift of self-discovery she provides. In the quiet crucible of their interactions, he learns that obsession is merely the shadow of attachment, a projection of his own fear onto the carrier of his desires. She models a different path, attachment to self-detachment from outcomes. Her eighth ritual is the mastery of non-attachment. She sips from the cup of life with gratitude, yet never grasps the chalice too tightly. When relationships shift or circumstances change, she meets the flux with the wisdom of Seneca. No man is crushed by misfortune unless he has first been deceived by prosperity. She shows without words that to hold too dear is to invite collapse. He, observing her equanimity in the face of loss, begins to recalibrate his own checklist of needs. He learns to let go of his grip even as he tightens his devotion to the moment at hand. Through non-attachment, he discovers freedom in presence, a freedom she seemed to possess from the start. And as he tastes that freedom, his obsession softens, replaced by respect. He no longer hunts her for her secrets. Instead, he listens for the whispers of his own. In that shift, the dynamic evolves from pursuit to partnership, two seekers sharing a boundless silence, each holding space for the other's mystery. Her ninth silent ritual unfolds in the alchemy of her laughter. It is neither forced nor frivolous, but an eruption of joy that springs from deep wells of self-acceptance. That laughter shimmers with the glow of inner light, illuminating the shadows he feared to traverse. He, unaccustomed to joy untainted by expectation, leans toward her mirth as one might approach a lantern in the dark. He marvels at the way her laughter binds her shadow to her light, weaving them into a single tapestry of being. You understand that genuine laughter is not escapism. It is the integration of all parts, the serious and the silly, the sacred and the profane, in a single dance of divine humanity. In the echo of her mirth, he senses his own capacity for wholeness. He dares to laugh too, and finds that his laughter reverberates with her, forging an unspoken bond that no obsession can fracture. He begins to walk beside her, rather than behind, matching her pace in the choreography of presence. And she, ever watchful, smiles in silent approval, for she knows that her ritual has borne fruit. He has become a pilgrim in his own heart. There remains one final ritual, the 10th, the consecration of silence. She honors the spaces between words, the breaths between thoughts, the quiet that holds them both. In that consecrated quiet, she communes with the self, Jung's archetype of wholeness, and from that communion springs the paradoxical power that ignites every desire. He comes to respect the majesty of silence as much as the allure of her voice. He learns that the most profound conversations need no words, and that the deepest intimacy arises when two souls rest together in the sacred hush. Through these 10 silent rituals, she does more than captivate him. She guides him toward himself. He is drawn not merely by her mystery, but by the promise of his own transformation. And you, watching their dance, feel the pull of your own silent rites beckoning. For in the heart of your mystery lies the power to awaken another, and in so doing, to awaken yourself. In the aftermath of these silent ceremonies, she emerges like a figure reborn, draped not in conquering banners, but in the quiet radiance of self-possession. He who once wandered through her mystery in search of answers now stands transformed, no longer a supplicant at her gates, but a witness to his own ascent. In the stillness that follows obsession, there lies a deeper revelation that desire unmoored from need becomes an expression of freedom rather than a plea for possession. You perceive how these rituals enacted in the sacred chamber of her own psyche ripple outward, dissolving the walls between longing and liberation. She moves forward unencumbered by the echoes of his pursuit. Her silence no longer speaks of absence, but of plenitude. In the place where absence once carved hollows of doubt, there now stands an altar of inner knowing. He watches from beyond the threshold, having tasted his own capacity for self-inquiry, and he understands that to stand beside her is to extend the invitation of freedom to himself. The magnetic pull of her mystery yields to the gentle gravity of two sovereign souls aligned in mutual respect. In this final act of emancipation, she performs her 11th silent ritual, though she names it only to herself the ritual of renunciation. She relinquishes the ghosts of past relationships, the residue of old codes that told her she must earn affection through performance or sacrifice. She strips away every expectation that once weighed upon her spirit, leaving only the core of her unadorned essence. In that renunciation, she discovers a new language, the language of pure presence. And in that language, she speaks volumes without uttering a single syllable. He perceives the shift. No longer does he chase the mirage of her approval. Instead, he basks in the warmth of her unclaimed self, accepting that her love is not a trophy to be captured, but a gift to be shared. His obsession dissolves into admiration, an admiration untethered from anxiety and free from the shadow of entitlement. You recognize that true attraction does not arise from scarcity, but from abundance, from the overflowing well of a heart at peace with itself. And as she practices this ultimate rite, this graceful unshackling of her own history, she invites him to do the same. He relinquishes the need to fill his own cracks with her light, choosing instead to kindle his own flame. The bonds of codependence loosen, and in the space between them, a new relationship takes form, one built not on hunger, but on mutual sovereignty. Two reflections, each whole unto itself, glimmer like twin flames in the vast cathedral of silence. In that cathedral, you too can find your place. You can stand at the threshold of your own inner sanctum and perform the ritual of renunciation. Release the worn-out scripts that tell you you are not enough. Lay down the masks that hide the sacred face beneath. Let every silent gesture become a testament to your own emancipation. For in the act of freeing yourself, you ignite the beacon that guides others toward their own liberation. Observe now how the world responds when you no longer seek to be validated. You become the axis around which genuine appreciation can turn. People admire not because you yield to their desire, but because you yield to your own truth. The chase dissolves into choice, and desire becomes an echo of self-affirmation rather than a cry for confirmation. You step into the sunlight of your own being, and all who encounter your glow feel invited to step into theirs. This is the culmination of the silent rites, not mastery over another's will, but mastery of one's own inner domain. It is the alchemy that turns fleeting longing into lasting peace. It is the transformation that elevates attraction from transaction to sacred communion. And in this communion, you find the key to a freedom that no obsession can imprison for. It is the freedom born of self-knowledge. Through each pause, each absence, each unvoiced word and hidden tear, she has molded a temple of unshakable sovereignty, a temple in which no force outside may intrude. And in witnessing her devotion to that sacred space, he learns to honor his own. Their dance reaches its final cadence, not in possession, but in partnership, two sovereigns sharing an unspoken vow to remain ever faithful to the self. The rituals have done their work. The obsessions have run their course. What remains is the quiet triumph of inner peace, an anthem sung in the language of silent grace. In that language, the final truth reveals itself, that the greatest power lies not in making someone chase you, but in choosing yourself. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.